The harsh winds of Dunwin Colony carried more than just sand. They carried secrets, whispers, and the faint scent of fear. Jared Mercer knew these winds well. After 5 years living on the outskirts of the settlement, he had come to appreciate the warning they sometimes brought, the subtle change in pitch that preceded a storm, or the distant howl that signaled approaching raiders. Today, the wind carried both. Jared's weathered hands moved mechanically over the broken power node he'd salvaged from an abandoned habitat module. The technology was outdated. Earth Authority had stopped manufacturing these particular models decades ago, but the colony always needed power. And Jared needed credits. It was a simple equation, one that kept him fed and, more importantly, alone. The small workshop he'd cobbled together from scrap metal and polymer sheets trembled as a particularly strong gust battered its eastern wall. Jared paused, listening. There was something else beneath the wind's howl, a distant wailing sound that had nothing to do with nature. Alarms. He set down his tools and moved to the doorway, squinting toward the main settlement. Even from 5 kilometers away, he could see the flashing red emergency beacons. His stomach tightened. Raiders. For a brief moment, he considered sealing himself inside his workshop. The raiders rarely bothered with lone scavengers on the outskirts. Too little reward for the effort. But something made him hesitate. Years of living on this frontier had honed instincts that had kept him alive. And right now, those instincts were screaming. Jared grabbed his old military-issue utility belt and strapped it around his waist. The weight of the multi-tool and compact stunner provided little comfort against what might be coming. But it was better than nothing. He'd just secured the workshop's reinforced door when he heard it, a soft, scuffling sound from behind the stacked metal plates near his workbench. Jared froze. He wasn't alone. "Who's there?" he demanded, drawing the stunner. "Show yourself!" Silence answered him. Then another soft shuffle. Jared moved cautiously toward the sound, weapon raised. He nudged aside a sheet of corrugated metal with his boot. 2 large, luminous eyes stared back at him from the shadows. Not human eyes. They glowed with a faint, blue-white phosphorescence that pulsed with the rhythm of a frightened heartbeat. Lumari eyes. A Lumari child. Jared felt his breath catch. The Lumari were the planet's native species, pushed to near extinction by human colonization. Earth Authority had labeled them dangerous anomalies, threats to human settlement. Harboring one, especially a child, carried penalties so severe most colonists wouldn't even speak of them. Yet, here she was, huddled among his scrap metal, staring up at him with eyes that contained equal parts terror and desperate hope. "Please," she whispered in broken common, the human trade language. "Hide me." Her blue-tinged skin was smeared with dust and what looked like dried blood. Around her neck hung a tarnished pendant on a simple chain. Her small hand clutched it tightly, as if it might shield her from harm. Jared knew he should report her presence immediately. The stunner trembled in his hand. One call to the authority patrols, and he would be rewarded, perhaps even earn passage off this forsaken planet. But those eyes, something in those eyes reached into the darkest corner of his heart, where he'd buried his past. The alarms in the distance grew more insistent. Outside, the sound of approaching hoverbikes cut through the wind's howl. Raiders, moving toward the outskirts, toward them. The child seemed to sense his indecision. She rose slightly from her hiding place, her small hand still clutching the pendant. "Will you be my father?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the growing chaos outside. The words hit Jared like a physical blow. Memories he'd suppressed for years flooded back. His daughter's smile, her laughter, her tiny hand in his as they walked through the garden of their home, on a planet whose name he could no longer bear to say aloud. Her screams as the raiders took her, as they burned everything he loved to ash. Before he could answer, the workshop's exterior lights went dark. The raiders were cutting power to the outlying structures. Standard procedure before a sweep. "They kill all," the girl whispered, her luminous eyes widening. "Like my mother." Outside, the first sounds of destruction began, metal tearing, glass shattering as the raiders methodically worked their way through the scavenger outpost. Jared made his decision. "Stay low," he said, holstering the stunner and reaching for her. "And quiet." The child didn't resist as he scooped her up. She was lighter than he expected, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. The pendant swung from her neck, briefly catching the emergency light's red glow. Jared moved to the workshop's rear wall, where a section of flooring concealed a narrow tunnel, his emergency escape route. He'd dug it during his first month at the outpost, a precaution born of bitter experience. "What's your name?" he asked, as he lowered her into the dark passage. "Selena," she said softly. "They call me Selena." He nodded, not asking who they were. Names were dangerous things on frontier worlds. Real names even more so. "Selena," he repeated. "I'm Jared." As he eased himself into the tunnel behind her, the workshop's main door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Through the settling dust, Jared caught a glimpse of armored figures, silhouetted against the night. Not the disorganized raiders he expected, but the precise formation of an Earth Authority patrol. They weren't hunting for scrap. They were hunting for her. "Move," he whispered urgently, sealing the tunnel entrance. "Now." They crawled through darkness, guided only by the soft glow of Selena's eyes. Behind them, Jared heard the systematic destruction of his workshop. 5 years of his life being dismantled in minutes. He felt nothing. Material possessions meant little to a man who had already lost everything that mattered. The tunnel opened onto a narrow ravine 1/2 kilometer from the outpost. By the time they emerged, the night sky above his former workshop glowed orange with flames. Jared didn't look back. He hoisted Selena onto his shoulders and began the long trek toward the cave system in the western foothills, a place he'd discovered years ago and kept as a contingency. Like everything in his life since the raid that took his daughter, it was a plan born of paranoia and loss. Now, that paranoia might save them both. Selena remained silent as they moved through the darkness, her small hands holding tightly to his shoulders. Only once did she speak, when they paused to rest in the shadow of a rock formation. "They find us?" she asked, her glowing eyes scanning the darkness behind them. Jared shook his head. "Not if we're careful. Not if we keep moving." She nodded solemnly, accepting his words with a trust he hadn't earned. As they resumed their journey, Jared felt the weight of that trust settling onto his shoulders, heavier than the child herself. What had he done? What madness had possessed him to throw away years of carefully constructed isolation for a Lumari child? He had survived by avoiding entanglements, by keeping his head down, by remembering that in this harsh world, attachments were vulnerabilities that would eventually be exploited. Yet here he was, carrying a living, breathing vulnerability across open terrain, pursued by forces that would show no mercy to either of them. By dawn, they reached the foothills. Jared's legs ached, and his mouth felt like it was filled with the desert itself. But he pushed onward. The cave entrance was concealed behind a cluster of thorny native vegetation, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Inside, the temperature dropped dramatically. Jared activated a small portable light, revealing a space he hadn't visited in over a year. The supplies he'd stashed were still there: water purifiers, emergency rations, a medical kit, and a few basic tools. He set Selena down gently on a bedroll and handed her a water container. She drank greedily, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Safe here?" she asked, those luminous eyes darting around the cave. "Safer than out there," Jared replied, settling down across from her. "We'll rest, then figure out our next move." Selena nodded, clutching her pendant again. Now, in the light, Jared could see it properly. a small, tarnished disc, with intricate engravings that seemed to shift and change as she touched it. "What is that?" he asked, gesturing to the pendant. Selina hesitated, then held it out for him to see. "Family," she said simply. As she tilted it toward the light, the pendant's surface flickered, and a tiny, holographic image appeared above it. 3 figures, all with the characteristic blue-tinged skin and luminous eyes of the Lumari. A family. Her family. "Mother!" She pointed to the tallest figure. "Father!" She indicated the other adult. "Me." Her small finger hovered over the smallest hologram. "Where are they now?" Jared asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Selina's eyes dimmed slightly. "Gone. Raiders came. Mother hid me. Then—" She made a slashing motion across her throat, the universal gesture for death. "Father gone before. Authority took—" Jared nodded, understanding, filling the spaces between her broken phrases. The Earth Authority had been systematically eliminating Lumari for years, claiming they carried diseases dangerous to humans. Raiders often did the Authority's dirty work in exchange for looking the other way regarding their other activities. "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling hollow and inadequate. Selina looked at him with those ancient, knowing eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "You lost too," she said. It wasn't a question. Jared's hand moved instinctively to his chest, where a similar pendant had once hung. Not alien technology, but a simple locket containing his daughter's image. He'd thrown it into the desert years ago, unable to bear the weight of the memories it carried. "Yes," he admitted. "My daughter. Raiders took her, 5 years ago." "Name?" Selina asked. "Lyra," he said, the name feeling strange on his tongue after so long. "Her name was Lyra." Selina nodded solemnly. "Lyra," she repeated, as if committing it to memory. "Pretty name." They fell into silence then, each lost in memories of what had been taken from them. Eventually, Selina's eyes dimmed completely as she drifted into sleep, the pendant still clutched in her small hand. Jared watched her sleep, his mind racing. He had no illusions about their situation. The Authority wouldn't stop hunting for a Lumari child, especially one who had witnessed a raid. And if they discovered a human had helped her escape, the punishment would be severe. They needed to keep moving, to find somewhere beyond the Authority's reach. But where? The planet was a frontier outpost, firmly under Earth Authority control. Every settlement, every outpost, every shuttle port had scanners calibrated to detect Lumari biosignatures. As he considered their limited options, Jared's gaze fell on Selina's pendant. The holographic technology it contained was far beyond what human colonists possessed. If the Lumari had such technology, what else might they have? What other secrets might this child carry? For now, though, they needed rest. Jared set up rudimentary alarms at the cave entrance, tripwires connected to small chimes that would alert them to any approach. It wasn't much, but it might give them enough warning to hide deeper in the cave system if necessary. As dawn broke over the desert planet, Jared finally allowed himself to close his eyes, one hand resting on the stunner at his side. His last thought before sleep claimed him was of Lyra, and how her eyes had once held the same trust he now saw in Selina's. He had failed to protect his daughter. He would not fail again. The next few days fell into a wary routine. They ventured out only at night, Jared teaching Selina how to move quietly across the rocky terrain, how to find water in seemingly barren landscapes, how to read the stars for navigation. In return, Selina showed him small wonders, how certain native plants glowed when touched by Lumari hands, how to mimic the call of desert birds to signal danger or safety, how her pendant could store not just images but sounds. One night, she activated a hidden function that played a haunting Lumari lullaby. The notes, floating in the air between them like tiny sparks of light. "Mother sang," she explained, her eyes glowing brighter with the memory. "When afraid—" Jared listened, mesmerized by the alien melody that somehow resonated with something deep within him. When the song ended, the silence felt heavier than before. "It's beautiful," he said finally. Selena nodded, then looked at him expectantly. "Your song? For Lyra?" The question caught him off guard. He hadn't sung in years, hadn't even thought about the lullabies he once sang to his daughter. But something in Selena's expectant gaze made him try to remember. Hesitantly, his voice rough with disuse, Jared began to sing an old Earth song about stars and wishes and dreams coming true. It was a simple melody, nothing like the complex harmonies of the Lumari lullaby. But Selena listened with rapt attention, her eyes glowing softly in the darkness. When he finished, she smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her. "Good father song," she said approvingly. The words sent a jolt through Jared. Father. She had called him that when they first met, a desperate plea rather than a statement of fact. Now it felt different, an acknowledgement of something growing between them, a bond neither had sought, but both desperately needed. On the fifth day, their fragile peace was shattered. Jared returned from scouting to find Selena agitated, her eyes pulsing rapidly. "Ships," she said, pointing skyward. "Many ships. Looking—" Jared slipped outside and scanned the horizon. Sure enough, 3 Authority patrol ships circled in the distance, their searchlights sweeping the desert floor in systematic patterns. They were getting closer. "We need to move," he said as he re-entered the cave. "They're expanding their search area." Selena nodded, already gathering their meager belongings. She had adapted quickly to life on the run, never complaining about the constant movement or the limited food and water. Sometimes Jared forgot she was a child, until moments like now, when fear made her eyes pulse rapidly and her small hands tremble as she clutched her pendant. "Where go?" she asked, slinging a small pack over her shoulder. Jared hesitated. He had been considering their options for days, and none were good. But there was one possibility, a rumor he'd heard years ago and dismissed as fantasy. An abandoned fusion reactor facility in the northern mountains, supposedly containing a forgotten shuttle. It was their only hope. If they could reach it, if the shuttle existed, if it still functioned after years of neglect. Too many ifs. But they had no choice. "North," he said finally. "To the mountains. There might be a way off planet." Selena's eyes widened. "Leave? Go where?" "I don't know," Jared admitted. "But we can't stay here. The Authority won't stop looking for you." For a moment, doubt clouded her features. "Why help me? Dangerous for you." The question hung between them, and Jared found himself without an easy answer. Why was he risking everything for this child? Was it merely guilt over failing to save his own daughter? Or was it something more? A chance at redemption, at rebuilding what had been taken from him. "Because it's right," he said finally. "Because you deserve a chance to live." Selena studied him with those ancient eyes, then nodded once, accepting his answer. "Together," she said, reaching for his hand. "Family." Jared took her small hand in his, marveling at the trust this gesture represented. "Together," he agreed. They set out that night, keeping to the shadows, moving northward toward the distant mountains. The journey would take them through an abandoned wind farm, a relic of the colony's early days, before fusion power had replaced more primitive energy sources. As they approached the wind farm 2 nights later, Jared sensed something was wrong. The massive turbines stood silent against the star-filled sky, but there was movement among them, the glint of metal catching starlight, the faint hum of idling engines. "Down," he whispered, pulling Selena behind a rocky outcropping. "Someone's there." They watched in silence as figures moved between the turbines. Not Authority patrols with their uniform movements and standard issue gear, but the haphazard formations and mismatched equipment of raiders. "Must have picked up our trail," Jared muttered, counting at least 6 figures. "See us?" Selena asked, her voice barely audible. "Not yet, but we need to get past them to reach the mountains." Jared studied the raiders' patterns, looking for gaps in their search grid. There was a narrow corridor between 2 defunct turbines that appeared unguarded. If they timed it right, they might slip through unnoticed. He explained the plan to Selena in hushed tones. She listened intently, then tugged at her pendant. "I help," she said. "Make, not see." Before Jared could question her meaning, Selena closed her eyes, clutching the pendant in both hands. It began to glow more intensely, and the air around them seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from sun-baked sand. "What are you doing?" Jared whispered, alarmed. Selena opened her eyes, which now glowed brighter than he'd ever seen. "Mirage," she said. "Family gift. Short time only." Jared stared in amazement as the air around them continued to distort. He realized what was happening. Selena was creating a mirage, bending light around them. It wouldn't make them invisible, but in the darkness, it might blur their outlines enough to confuse watching eyes. "Now go," Selena urged, her voice strained with effort. "Quick!" They moved from their hiding place, keeping low to the ground. Jared led the way toward the gap between turbines, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure the raiders would hear it. Selena followed close behind, one hand maintaining contact with her pendant, the other gripping the back of Jared's jacket. They were halfway across the open space when disaster struck. A raider emerged unexpectedly from behind a turbine base, almost colliding with them. For a frozen moment, the 3 figures stood in tableau, Jared and Selena caught in the open, the raider's shocked expression visible through his dusty visor. Then, everything happened at once. The raider reached for his weapon, shouting an alarm. Jared lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground. Selena's mirage faltered as her concentration broke. "Run!" Jared yelled to her as he grappled with the raider. "Follow the plan, I'll find you!" But Selena didn't run. Instead, she clutched her pendant and focused, her small face contorted with effort. The air around the struggling men shimmered violently, and suddenly, instead of one raider fighting Jared, there appeared to be 3 identical figures rolling on the ground. The approaching raiders faltered, confused by the multiple images. In their hesitation, Jared managed to connect his fist with the real raider's temple, stunning him momentarily. He scrambled to his feet, grabbed Selena, and ran toward the gap between turbines. Behind them, shouts of confusion gave way to the whine of hoverbikes powering up. They weren't going to make it on foot. Jared spotted a disabled hoverbike leaning against a turbine base. It was their only chance. He changed direction, pulling Selena with him. "Can you do that mirage thing again?" he asked as they ran. "Just for a few more seconds." Selena nodded, though her glowing eyes had dimmed with exhaustion. "Try," she gasped. They reached the hoverbike. Jared lifted Selena onto it, then examined the vehicle quickly. The power cell was intact, but the ignition system had been stripped. Typical raider practice to prevent theft. As the sounds of pursuit grew closer, Jared pulled out his multi-tool and set to work, bypassing the ignition. Behind him, Selena created multiple mirage images of them scattered among the turbines, buying precious seconds. "Almost there," Jared muttered, connecting the final circuits. The hoverbike hummed to life, lifting slightly off the ground. "Selena, drop the mirages and hold on tight." She obeyed, wrapping her arms around his waist as he gunned the engine. The hoverbike lurched forward, skimming across the rocky terrain toward the gap between turbines. Laser fire erupted behind them, cutting through the darkness in brilliant red streaks. Jared zigzagged, making them a harder target, all too aware of the small body pressed against his back. If a shot found them. But they made it through the gap and into the open desert beyond. Jared pushed the hoverbike to its limits, the wind roaring in their ears as they raced toward the distant mountains. Only when the lights of the wind farm had faded to pinpricks on the horizon did he ease off the throttle, allowing himself to breathe again. "You okay?" he called over his shoulder. "Yes," came the small voice, muffled against his back. "Tired." "Rest," he told her. "I'll keep us moving." As Selena's grip around his waist relaxed slightly, Jared's mind raced. The raid wasn't a coincidence. The raiders had been waiting, as if they knew someone would pass through the wind farm, which meant someone was tracking them, or at least predicting their movements. And Selena's abilities, the mirages she created, had saved their lives. No wonder the Earth Authority considered Lumari children dangerous. If a frightened 8-year-old could create such convincing illusions, what might adult Lumari be capable of? But dangerous to whom? Jared wondered. All he had seen was a child using her gifts to protect, not harm. The real danger came from those hunting her. They reached the foothills of the northern mountains as dawn broke. Jared found a sheltered overhang where they could rest and conceal the hoverbike. Selena had fallen asleep against his back during the journey, her small body limp with exhaustion. Gently, he lifted her from the bike and laid her on his jacket. In sleep, the glow of her eyes dimmed to a faint flicker, visible through her closed eyelids. She looked unbearably vulnerable, just a child, despite her remarkable abilities. Jared settled beside her, keeping watch as she slept. The pendant hung from her neck, its surface dull now that she wasn't actively using it. He studied it curiously, wondering about its origins and capabilities. Carefully, so as not to wake her, he touched the pendant's surface. Nothing happened. Whatever power it contained seemed to respond only to Selena's touch, her Lumari biology. As he withdrew his hand, Selena stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Broken," she murmured, noticing his interest in the pendant. "Not work right since—" She trailed off, but Jared understood. Since the raid, since she lost her family. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the pendant. After a moment's hesitation, Selena slipped the chain over her head and handed it to him. Up close, Jared could see hairline fractures in its surface, damage that wasn't visible from a distance. "I might be able to repair it," he offered. "I'm good with broken things." Selena's eyes brightened hopefully. "Fix family?" The innocent question pierced Jared's heart. He couldn't fix what had been broken most thoroughly, her family, his family. But perhaps he could repair this small token, this connection to her past. "I'll try to fix the pendant," he clarified gently. "The rest, I don't know if anyone can fix that." Selena nodded, accepting his honesty. "Try," she said simply. "That good." Using his multi-tool and skills, honed from years of scavenging, Jared carefully worked on the damaged pendant. The technology was unlike anything he'd encountered before, but the principles of circuitry and energy flow were universal. He identified where connections had been severed, where power was leaking uselessly into the air. It took hours of painstaking work. But finally, the pendant began to glow more steadily in his hands. When he activated the holographic function, the images of Selena's family appeared more clearly than before, their features distinct and vibrant. "There," he said, satisfied with his work. "Not perfect, but better." He returned the pendant to Selena, who cradled it reverently in her small hands. The holographic family floated above it, more detailed than before. Tears welled in her luminous eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Father." The word hung between them, no longer a desperate plea, but a title bestowed with solemn intent. Jared felt something shift inside him, a wall crumbling that he had built after Lyra's loss. "You're welcome," he said, his voice rough with emotion. They spent the day resting and planning their approach to the fusion reactor facility. According to Jared's old maps, it lay deep in the mountains, accessible only through a narrow pass that would be difficult to navigate with the hoverbike. "We'll need to go on foot for the last part," he explained, as they shared a meager meal of emergency rations. "The pass is too narrow, and the terrain too rough for the bike." Selina nodded, studying the crude map he'd drawn in the dust. "Authority there?" "I don't know," Jared admitted. "The facility was abandoned years ago when they built the new reactor closer to the main settlement. But given how hard they're looking for you, they might have patrols checking all possible escape routes." "Why want me?" Selina asked, the question that had been hovering unspoken between them. Many Lumari children before, all taken. Why chase so far? Jared had been wondering the same thing. The authorities' response seemed disproportionate for a single Lumari child, even one with Selina's unusual abilities. "I don't know," he said truthfully, "but I intend to find out. And more importantly, I intend to get you somewhere safe." "Safe," Selina repeated, as if testing the word. "With you?" "With me," Jared confirmed. If that's what you want." Selina's eyes glowed brighter. "Yes, want family? You good father?" The simple declaration left Jared speechless. After a moment, he cleared his throat. "We should rest. We move at nightfall." But as Selina curled up to sleep, Jared remained awake, turning her words over in his mind. You good father, was he? He had failed to protect Lyra. What made him think he could protect Selina any better? Yet, here they were, against all odds. They had escaped raiders and authority patrols. They had found a path forward. Perhaps, just perhaps, redemption was possible after all. As night fell, they prepared to move out. The mountains loomed before them, their jagged peaks cutting into the star-filled sky. Somewhere among those peaks lay the fusion reactor facility, and, Jared hoped, their ticket off planet. They left the hoverbike hidden under a pile of loose rocks. If they needed to make a quick escape, it would be there. If not, it had served its purpose. The mountain pass was as treacherous as Jared remembered from his old maps, narrow in places, with loose scree that shifted underfoot, and sheer drops that disappeared into darkness. They moved slowly, Jared leading the way, Selina following close behind. "Careful," he warned as they navigated a particularly narrow section. "Step exactly where I step." Selina obeyed without question, her trust in him absolute. The responsibility of that trust weighed on Jared, making him doubly cautious, checking and rechecking each foothold before proceeding. They were halfway through the pass when a distant rumble echoed through the mountains. Jared froze, listening intently. The sound grew louder, the unmistakable hum of authority patrol ships. "Down," he whispered, pulling Selina into the shadow of an overhanging rock. "Don't move." They pressed themselves against the cold stone as searchlights swept the mountainside, probing into crevices and illuminating the pass ahead. The patrol ships moved in a grid pattern, methodically scanning the terrain. "Looking for heat," Jared murmured, noting the infrared scanners mounted beneath the ships. "Your body temperature. Is it different from humans?" Selina nodded, fear evident in her glowing eyes. "Cooler, like stone." That explained how she had remained undetected in his workshop, huddled among metal plates. The scanners would have registered her as part of the surrounding materials. "Good," Jared said. "Stay still, they might pass us by." But one of the patrol ships slowed as it approached their position, its searchlight lingering on the area around them. Had they been spotted? Jared tensed, ready to run, though he knew they wouldn't get far on the narrow path. Beside him, Selina clutched her pendant. Her eyes narrowed in concentration. The air around them shimmered, and Jared felt a strange coolness enveloping his body. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "Making cold," she replied, her voice strained. "Like me, hiding heat." Jared watched in amazement as the searchlight passed directly over them, then moved on, continuing its sweep of the mountainside. The patrol ship accelerated, joining the others as they disappeared over the ridge. When they were gone, Selena released her pendant, slumping against the rock. Her eyes had dimmed to a faint glow, and her breathing was labored. "That was incredible," Jared said. "How did you do that?" "Pendant help," she explained weakly. "Father teach before taken. Not just make pictures. Change things." She gestured vaguely at the air around them. Hard, tired now. Jared studied her with newfound respect and concern. The abilities she possessed were far beyond what he had imagined. Not just creating visual illusions, but manipulating temperature. Perhaps even other physical properties. No wonder the authority was hunting her so relentlessly. "Rest a moment," he said, offering her water. "Then we need to keep moving. The facility isn't far now." After a brief rest, they continued through the pass, emerging onto a plateau that overlooked a valley. Below them, partially embedded in the mountainside, stood the abandoned fusion reactor facility, a massive complex of concrete and metal, its once gleaming surfaces now dulled by years of exposure to the harsh elements. "There it is," Jared said, pointing. "Our way off this planet, if we're lucky." They descended toward the facility, moving with increased caution. The area around it was eerily quiet. No signs of wildlife, no movement except the occasional piece of loose metal shifting in the wind. The main entrance was sealed, as Jared had expected. But he knew from his time as a military engineer that such facilities always had emergency exits that doubled as alternate entry points. They circled the perimeter until they found what he was looking for. A maintenance hatch partially concealed by accumulated debris. Using his multi-tool, Jared worked on the hatch's locking mechanism. It took longer than he anticipated, the years of disuse having fused components together. But eventually, the hatch swung open with a protesting groan. "Stay behind me," he instructed Selena as they entered the facility. "And tell me if you sense anything unusual." She nodded, her eyes providing enough illumination for them to navigate the dark corridor beyond the hatch. The air inside was stale but breathable, carrying the faint metallic scent characteristic of fusion technology. They moved deeper into the facility, through maintenance tunnels and auxiliary control rooms. Everything was powered down. The only sounds their footsteps and the occasional drip of condensation from overhead pipes. "Where's ship?" Selena whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "If it exists, it would be in the testing bay," Jared replied. "That's where they would have kept transport vehicles for emergency evacuation." They continued their cautious advance until they reached a junction, where the maintenance tunnel opened onto a much larger space. Jared peered around the corner, then pulled back, his expression grim. "What wrong?" Selena asked, sensing his tension. "Authority patrols," he said quietly. "They're already here." Through the doorway, Jared had glimpsed several armed figures in the distinctive uniforms of Earth Authority soldiers. They were stationed around what appeared to be a small shuttle, exactly what he and Selena had been hoping to find. "They knew we were coming," Jared muttered. "Someone predicted our movements again." Selena clutched her pendant, her eyes darting nervously. "What do now?" Jared considered their options, none of which were good. They could retreat, try to find another way off planet. But where? They could attempt to wait out the patrol, hoping they would eventually leave. But for how long? Or they could try to reach the shuttle anyway, using Selena's abilities to create a diversion. Before he could decide, a voice echoed through the facility's ancient PA system, startling them both. "Attention fugitives," the voice announced, cold and authoritative. "We know you are within this facility. Surrender immediately, and no harm will come to you. Resist, and we will use lethal force. You have 5 minutes to comply." Jared's mind raced. The patrol must have detected their entry somehow, despite Selena's heat-masking ability. Perhaps motion sensors or other surveillance systems had remained active in the abandoned facility. "We need a plan," he whispered to Selena. "Can you create a diversion with your mirages? Something to draw them away from the shuttle?" Selena nodded hesitantly. "Try. But many soldiers. Strong lights." She pointed to the powerful floodlights the patrol had set up around the testing bay, which would make her illusions less effective. "We just need a few seconds of confusion," Jared assured her. "Enough to reach the shuttle. Once inside, I can pilot it out of here." He quickly outlined a plan. Selena would create multiple mirage images of them appearing at different points around the testing bay. While the patrol was distracted, they would make a run for the shuttle, using the confusion to board before the soldiers realized which images were real. "Ready?" he asked, checking that his stunner was fully charged. It wouldn't do much against armored soldiers, but it might buy them precious seconds if needed. Selena gripped her pendant, her eyes glowing brighter as she prepared to create the mirages. "Ready, Father." The term still sent a jolt through Jared each time she used it, a reminder of all they had to lose and all they had to gain. "Now," he whispered. Selena closed her eyes, concentrating fiercely. The air around them shimmered, and suddenly, multiple versions of Jared and Selena appeared throughout the testing bay. Some ran in one direction, others in another. A few stood defiantly in plain sight, drawing the soldiers' attention. "Go," Jared urged, pulling Selena with him as they sprinted toward the shuttle. The patrol responded exactly as he'd hoped, momentarily confused by the multiple targets. Shouts filled the air as soldiers attempted to coordinate their response, unsure which figures to pursue. Jared and Selena reached the shuttle's ramp. The door was open, the interior dark. As they prepared to board, a commanding voice cut through the chaos. "Hold your fire, those are decoys!" Jared turned to see a tall, silver-haired man in an Earth Authority colonel's uniform striding across the testing bay. Unlike his soldiers, he wasn't aiming at the mirages. He was looking directly at them, his cold eyes fixed on Selena. "The Lumari child," the colonel said, his voice carrying across the space between them. "And her human accomplice. How interesting." Jared pushed Selena behind him, positioning himself between her and the colonel. "We're leaving," he stated, trying to keep his voice steady. "Stand down and let us pass." The colonel laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You're in no position to make demands. Scavenger. That child is Authority property, a dangerous anomaly that must be contained." "She's a child," Jared countered. "Who needs a home, not a laboratory?" Something flickered across the colonel's face, a brief spasm of emotion quickly suppressed. "A child," he repeated. "Is that what you think? Let me educate you, Scavenger. The Lumari aren't like us. Their abilities, their gifts, as they call them, make them inherently dangerous. That child could kill everyone in this facility with a thought, if properly triggered." Behind Jared, Selena trembled, her mirages beginning to falter as her concentration wavered. "You're wrong," Jared said firmly. "I've been with her for days. She's used her abilities to protect, not harm. The only danger here is you and your men." The colonel's expression hardened. "My name is Colonel Varkos," he said coldly. 20 years ago, the Lumari released a pathogen that killed thousands of colonists, including my daughter. So don't lecture me about danger, Scavenger. I know exactly what they're capable of." Jared felt Selena grip the back of his jacket, her small body pressed against him in fear. The colonel's revelation explained his personal vendetta, but it didn't justify hunting a child who had nothing to do with events from before she was born. "I'm sorry about your daughter," Jared said, meaning it. "I lost mine too, to raiders, not disease. But Selena isn't responsible for what happened to your child, any more than you are for what happened to mine." For a moment, doubt seemed to cross the colonel's features. Then his gaze hardened again. "It doesn't matter. I have my orders. The Lumari child comes with us. You. He gestured dismissively at Jared. You can go. One last chance to walk away. Jared felt Selena's grip tighten on his jacket. Will you be my father? She had asked days ago. A desperate plea from a desperate child. Now the question hung between them again. Unspoken, but crucial. His answer hadn't changed. I'm not leaving without her, Jared stated firmly. She's under my protection now. The colonel sighed, as if disappointed, but not surprised. Then you leave me no choice. He raised his hand, signaling his men. Take them both. Lethal force authorized on the human if necessary. The child must be taken alive. As the soldiers advanced, Selena's mirages disappeared completely. Her energy focused now on a different kind of defense. The pendant in her hands began to glow with increasing intensity, pulsing with a rhythm that matched her accelerated heartbeat. Run, she whispered to Jared. I stopped them. Not without you, Jared insisted, drawing his stunner, even as he knew how futile it was against armored soldiers. The first shots rang out, energy beams sizzling past them to impact the shuttle's hull. Jared pushed Selena toward the ramp, shielding her with his body. A shot grazed his leg, sending white-hot pain shooting up his thigh. He stumbled, but remained standing. Behind them, the shuttle systems began to power up, responding to proximity sensors, or perhaps to some command Jared hadn't seen Selena give. Lights flickered on in the cockpit, and the engines hummed with building energy. Almost there, Jared gasped, limping up the ramp with Selena. Just a few more steps. Colonel Varkos shouted orders, his voice almost lost in the growing roar of the shuttle's engines. More shots rang out, one striking Jared squarely in the back. He fell forward onto the shuttle's deck, the stunner clattering from his hand. Father, Selena cried, kneeling beside him. Through a haze of pain, Jared saw soldiers rushing toward the ramp. They would reach them in seconds. Close the door, he managed to say. Get to the cockpit. Go. But Selena didn't move. Instead, she stood up, facing the approaching soldiers. Her small form was silhouetted against the shuttle's interior lights, the pendant clutched in both hands before her. No, she shouted, her voice carrying a harmonics that Jared had never heard before. No take, father. The pendant exploded with light. Not the gentle glow of a hologram, but a blinding pulse that filled the testing bay. Jared shielded his eyes, hearing shouts of pain and confusion from the soldiers. When he could see again, the soldiers nearest the ramp lay on the ground, stunned but alive. Colonel Varkos stood farther back, his arm raised to shield his eyes, shock evident on his face. Selena swayed, then collapsed beside Jared, the pendant falling from her hands. It rolled across the deck, coming to rest against the shuttle's bulkhead, its light now a faint, irregular pulse. With his remaining strength, Jared reached for the ramp controls and activated the closing sequence. The ramp began to rise, sealing them inside the shuttle as shouts and renewed weapons fire erupted outside. Selena, Jared called, dragging himself toward her motionless form. Selena, wake up. Her eyes flickered, the glow dim but present. Did help? She whispered. Yes, Jared assured her, gathering her small body in his arms despite the pain radiating from his wounds. You helped. You saved us both. The shuttle systems continued their activation sequence, displays lighting up in the cockpit. Jared realized the vessel was preparing for automatic launch, perhaps triggered by the closing of the ramp, or by some emergency protocol designed to activate when the facility's systems detected weapons fire. He needed to get them to the cockpit, to take control of the ship before it launched on some pre-programmed course that might deliver them straight into Authority hands. But his injured leg wouldn't support his weight, and darkness was encroaching on the edges of his vision. Selena, he said urgently, can you move? We need to get to the cockpit. She stirred in his arms, her eyes brightening slightly. Try, she murmured. Together. They crawled toward the cockpit, Jared leaving a trail of blood on the deck behind them. Outside, the sounds of chaos continued. Shouted orders, the whine of energy weapons, the pounding of armored fists against the shuttle's hull. They reached the pilot's seat, just as the engines reached full power. The control panel flashed with warning lights and automated sequences. Jared pulled himself into the seat, Selena clinging to his side. "Hold on," he gasped, recognizing enough of the controls to override the auto-launch sequence. If they took off now, the Authority ships would be waiting for them in orbit. They needed to delay, to let the confusion below buy them time to plan a safer escape. But before he could input the override, Selena reached past him, her small hand touching a specific sequence of symbols on the control panel. The symbols glowed in response to her touch, changing from standard human script to flowing Lumari characters. "What are you doing?" Jared asked, bewildered. "Father teach," Selena explained, her voice stronger now. "Before taken, emergency code, help Lumari escape." The control panel reconfigured itself before Jared's eyes, displays shifting to show new information, hidden systems, masked energy signatures, stealth capabilities he hadn't known the shuttle possessed. "Lumari ship," Selena said simply, "disguised as human." Jared stared in amazement. The shuttle wasn't an Authority evacuation vessel as he had assumed. It was a Lumari escape craft, designed to appear as human technology to avoid detection. That explained why it had responded to Selena's presence, why the Colonel had been so determined to capture rather than destroy it. "Can you fly it?" he asked, his vision blurring as blood loss took its toll. Selena shook her head. "Not yet. Too young, but can help." She placed her hands on two indentations in the control panel. The ship hummed in response, systems aligning to her touch. A holographic display appeared before them, showing a course that would take them not into planetary orbit, but through a narrow mountain pass and then along a trajectory that avoided all known Authority patrol routes. "Clever," Jared murmured, understanding dawning. The ship had been programmed with escape routes by Lumari, who had anticipated the need for their children to flee, perhaps by Selena's own father before he was taken. With the last of his strength, Jared initiated the launch sequence. The shuttle's engines roared, and they felt the vessel lift off, breaking free of the facility's confines. Through the viewport, they caught a glimpse of Colonel Varkos and his men scrambling for cover as the engine wash swept across the testing bay. Then they were airborne, accelerating rapidly toward the mountain pass, the shuttle's stealth systems activating to mask their heat signature and radar profile. Jared's consciousness began to fade, the pain and blood loss finally overwhelming him. The last thing he saw was Selena's face, her luminous eyes fixed on his with concern and determination. "Stay, Father," she pleaded. "Stay with Selena." "Always," Jared promised, before darkness claimed him. He drifted in and out of consciousness, aware at times of movement, of gentle hands tending to his wounds, of a soft voice singing a familiar lullaby. Selena's voice, he realized, singing the Earth song he had taught her. When Jared finally awoke fully, he found himself in an unfamiliar room. The walls curved gracefully, made of a material that seemed to glow with a soft, ambient light. He lay on a comfortable surface that adjusted to his movements, supporting his injured body. "Where?" he began, his voice cracking with disuse. "Sanctuary Station," came a melodic voice from nearby. "Orbiting Eris Prime. You are safe now." Jared turned his head to see a tall, blue-skinned figure standing in the doorway, a female Lumari, her luminous eyes regarding him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "My name is Zahara," she said, approaching his bed. "Though some call me Jenna. I am a caretaker here." She gestured to his bandaged leg and back. "Your wounds are healing well." The child's pendant accelerated the process considerably. Selena, Jared said urgently, attempting to sit up. Where is she? Zahara smiled, the expression lighting her features. Resting. She refused to leave your side for 3 cycles. Only when your vital signs stabilized did she agree to sleep. Relief flooded through Jared. She's safe then? Yes, Zahara confirmed. As are you, Jared Mercer. At his startled look, she added, Selena told us your name, and much about your journey together. How did we get here? Jared asked, struggling to piece together the fragments of memory from after their escape. The shuttle was programmed to seek out this sanctuary, if activated with the proper codes. Zahara explained. Selena's father ensured she knew those codes before he was taken. When you lost consciousness, the ship's automated systems continued on course while Selena used her pendant to stabilize your condition. By the time you reached our docking bay, you were in critical condition, but alive thanks to her efforts. Jared absorbed this information, amazed at Selena's resourcefulness and courage. And the authority? Will they find this place? Zahara's expression grew solemn. The sanctuary exists in a neutral zone, hidden by natural phenomena that confound standard sensors. We have existed here for many cycles, providing refuge to those who need it, Lumari, humans, and others who seek peace rather than conflict. She moved to a viewport, gesturing for Jared to look. With effort, he rose from the bed and joined her, his injuries protesting but not incapacitating. Through the viewport, he saw a vast, circular chamber. Beings of various species moved about in apparent harmony. Blue-skinned Lumari, humans of different ethnicities, and other alien forms Jared didn't recognize. Children played together in an open area, their differences seemingly irrelevant to their shared joy. This is what the authority fears, Zahara said quietly. Not our abilities, but the proof that their narrative of incompatibility is false. Here, we live together, learn from each other, grow stronger through our diversity. Jared watched the scene below, a strange emotion welling within him. Hope, he realized. For the first time in years, he felt hope. And Selena, he asked, what will happen to her now? That depends, Zahara replied, studying him with those luminous eyes. On what you decide. Before Jared could question her meaning, the door to the chamber slid open. Selena stood there, her eyes brightening dramatically when she saw Jared awake and standing. Father, she cried, rushing forward. Jared knelt despite his injuries, opening his arms. Selena flew into them, her small body colliding with his in a fierce embrace that brought both pain and indescribable joy. You stay, she whispered against his shoulder, half statement, half question. Jared held her tightly, aware of Zahara discreetly leaving the room to give them privacy. In that moment, the decision Zahara had mentioned became clear. He could leave, return to the solitary existence he had known before. Or he could stay, become the father Selena needed, build a new life in this hidden sanctuary. No decision at all, really. I'll stay, he promised, his voice thick with emotion. As long as you want me. Selena pulled back slightly, her luminous eyes searching his face. Always want, she stated, with childlike certainty. Then, more formally, as if reciting words of great importance, will you be my father? Jared smiled through tears he hadn't realized were falling. Always, he replied, echoing her certainty with his own. Always. Later, when Jared's strength had returned enough for him to walk unaided, Zahara escorted them through the sanctuary station. Selena held his hand, proudly introducing him to other Lumari children and their caretakers, some of whom were human like himself. Many mixed families here, Zahara explained as they watched a human man teaching a young Lumari boy how to play an Earth game. Some by choice, some by circumstance, all by love. They reached a set of doors that opened onto a central gathering place, where residents of all species shared meals and conversation. As they entered, a hush fell over the assembly. Eyes, human, Lumari, and other, turned to regard them with open curiosity. Zahara stepped forward. "Friends," she announced, her melodic voice carrying across the space. "I present Jared Mercer and Selena, newly arrived from Dunwin Colony. They have journeyed far and faced much danger to reach us. Let us welcome them to our community." A murmur of greetings rippled through the gathering. Then, one by one, people approached, offering words of welcome, small gifts, invitations to share meals or join learning circles. Jared was overwhelmed by the genuine warmth of their reception. A small Lumari girl, perhaps a year or two younger than Selena, approached shyly. "Your eyes," she said to Jared, pointing to his decidedly human features. "Not glow." Selena stepped forward protectively. "My father," she declared, squeezing Jared's hand. "Good father." The younger girl considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Good father," she agreed, before skipping back to her own family, a Lumari woman and a human man, who offered Jared an understanding smile. As the initial welcome subsided, Zahara led them to a small, private chamber off the main gathering place. "These will be your quarters," she explained. "Modest, but comfortable. You may decorate them as you wish." The room was indeed simple but thoughtfully designed, with 2 sleeping areas, a shared living space, and a viewport that offered a breathtaking view of the stars beyond the station. Selena immediately claimed the smaller sleeping area, placing her pendant, now glowing steadily once more, on a shelf beside it. "Home?" she asked, looking to Jared for confirmation. "Home," he agreed, marveling at how easily the word came after years of avoiding any place or person that might inspire attachment. That night, after Selena had fallen asleep, Jared stood by the viewport, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth Authority patrols continued their hunt. Colonel Varkos, fueled by grief and misplaced vengeance, might never cease searching for them. But here, in this hidden sanctuary, they had found not just safety, but belonging. A place where a human man could be father to a Lumari child without fear or judgment. A place where past losses could begin to heal through new connections. Jared heard a soft sound behind him and turned to find Selena standing there, her eyes glowing gently in the dimness. "No sleep?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "Just thinking," Jared replied, putting an arm around her shoulders. "About the future." Selena leaned against him, her gaze following his to the stars beyond. "Good future," she said with the certainty of a child. "Together." Jared smiled, feeling the last of his emotional walls crumble completely. "Together," he agreed. He thought of Lyra then, not with the searing pain that had accompanied her memory for so long, but with a bittersweet ache that acknowledged both loss and healing. She would have liked Selena, he believed, would have embraced this strange new family without hesitation. "Song?" Selena requested sleepily, the excitement of the day finally catching up to her. Jared began to sing softly, the earth lullaby about stars and wishes that he had sung to her in the desert. Selena joined in, her voice harmonizing with his in a way that wasn't quite human, but was entirely beautiful. As the last notes faded, Selena whispered, "Always, Father?" Jared drew her closer, his answer encompassing all they had endured and all that lay ahead. "Always, daughter." In the soft glow of starlight and Selena's luminous eyes, a family once broken beyond repair found itself reforged, stronger at the mended places, more precious for having almost been lost. And as they stood together at the threshold of their new life, Jared knew with absolute certainty that when Selena had looked up at him in his workshop and whispered, "Will you be my father?" he had made the only choice that mattered. He couldn't have walked away, and he never would.